First of all, we're starting this. And so, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I think we've got a great discussion here. A hot topic that I don't see too many people trying to address out there in this Zoom land. And so it's going to be a great conversation. And again, I really appreciate Roger, Mina, and Scott for jumping in and helping out here. Just a little bit about ACG for those that might not be familiar, that, we're Association for Corporate Growth in Silicon Valley chapter. And this is a C-Circle event. So what we try to do, and pre-COVID, we'd actually be together for an hour of networking and then an hour kind of, I say more of like a round table discussion. We'll have a moderator such as myself and a couple panelists. And then, but really we kind of try to kick off and run the conversation, but love to have the input. And what we just, the goal of an event like this in our C-Circle is really to bring C-level executives. We have from startup to big public companies in the room, and really just an opportunity to sit down for an hour with peers and get to know, some of the issues, how their peers and how other companies are dealing with some of these hot issues. And so that's what our goal is today. And so I would say, please, as we go through this, use the chat to help, or just unmute yourself and ask questions as we go along. We'd love it to be more of a discussion than kind of everybody sit back. And so please, your questions and input are welcome and encouraged. So I am Andy Armstrong, and I am an audit partner at Singer Lewack. I really work with a lot of venture-backed startup companies is my main focus. And I do a lot of 401k work as well. But I'm on the board of ACG and work heavily with the board on events like this, and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to turn the time over, though, real quick to Jim Chapman. He has done these C-Circles forever. He's phenomenal. If you don't know Jim, you need to know Jim. But I'll let him introduce himself real quick, just because he's going to help me monitor the chats and the questions as they come in. So Jim, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Jim Chapman. I'm a partner at Ramon, and I've been a lawyer in Silicon Valley for over 35 years. I've been involved in almost 400 M&A and venture capital deals during that time. I was moderated the C-Circle for about 6 or 7 years. And so welcome. This should be a great discussion. Absolutely, as Andy said, use the chat to get your questions in. This is really an interesting topic for a variety of different reasons. But anyway, go ahead, Andy.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to just move on and let, Roger, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Thanks, Andy. I'm Roger Pondell with Pondell Wilkinson. We are an investor relations and advisory firm mostly to public companies that require, obviously, investor relations, but we also do strategic communications and work with tech companies, pre-public as well as post-public. The firm's been around a long time. I was not the founder of it. We have, just from a perspective standpoint, when you guys start asking questions, so you know where my head is coming from, it's mostly, but not fully, the public company arena, and a ton of change going on, on this whole topic of social justice. From a corporate standpoint, we have startup companies, private and public, that maybe shouldn't be public. Most of our client base is middle market, classic middle market companies, but we have them on both sides, and been doing it a long time. This whole topic is something that used to be paid lip service to by the C-suite. It is no longer just lip service, and I know we're going to get into that, so I'll defer that to later discussion.
Hey, thanks, appreciate it, Roger. Mina, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Mina Trujillo. I've been doing PR and marketing my entire life. That's all I know how to do. I own a PR agency, Craft PR. I specialize in the financial services, mainly professional services, but my background runs the gamut. I started my career at Arthur Andersen and was there when they turned off the lights on us. So that was interesting. And then I've I work with Singer Lewak, they're my client. I'm more of an outsourced CMO type, but I do marketing strategy and I do consumer products. I own a tequila company and I used to own a cosmetic company. So I kind of go between financial services and consumer products. So can, kind of bridge both.
Awesome. Thanks, Mina. And then Scott, I'm going to have you introduce yourself as well. Then we'll get going.
Certainly. I'm Scott Mellon. I'm the CEO of Life Labs. Life Labs is a Silicon Valley-based material science company. We're focused on commercializing Department of Energy funded research that Dr. Yi Xu at Stanford developed that are thermoregulating textiles that allow you to live more comfortably and use less energy. So these technologies were funded again by the DOE in an effort to help people lower their thermostats, saving 6,000 pounds of carbon a year per household. So we go live in October of this year.
That's exciting. Well, thank you. So, and I really, again, I know they just mentioned it, but I love the fact that we've got a diverse panel in terms of experience, right? We've got Roger who works with a lot of public companies, small as, private as well. But, Scott, his prior work as well as building big brands and big companies and now in the startup world. And it's fun to talk to him. And I know he'll share some of those experiences in terms of kind of being able to do this startup and starting from scratch and what that means as it relates to all of these topics today. And then, and Mina as well, and professional services and consumer products. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I just want to jump right in now. And I think we know the topic in terms of protecting our brand in an age of social justice with, everything going on. It's, COVID wasn't enough over the last 18 years. It's like, we needed all of these other things to, what an interesting time that we're living in. And I just want to start off by asking the panel, with all these events, right? I think it's really just been in the last 18 months. We've had elections, Black Lives Matter, defund the police, a reevaluation of, American history, COVID-19. What has been the change on corporate culture in America as a result of all of this? Mina, why don't you kick us off?
Well, first of all, I think very interesting for sure, the times we're living in. I think a lot of these issues have always been there, just they were augmented by, turn of events. I also think that it's people have, because the rise of social media, I think everyone's so much more connected that you can turn any little issue into a big, a big propaganda and gain following and gain steam very quickly. I think it was just the perfect storm for a lot of things that just came out of nowhere and were augmented by certain events like the George Floyd situation, which I think kind of just prompted people to kind of go, no more. We're already stressed out and we've been dealing with all these issues, so no more. And then it became, a something much bigger than that. But I think a lot of these things have always been there. It's just now that the power of social media and the new generation that are saying, we're not going to accept this. It's not acceptable and we're going to speak up. Whereas before, I think we were just kind of like, it's unacceptable. So we're going to get together with this group and we're going to do, try to do whatever we can to bring, what's the word I'm looking for? Just to bring it up to the different areas of what's the word I'm looking for? Of publicity, or to affect change. But now with social media, like I said, it's just so much easier to get all these other people on board with whatever you're doing. So there was a bunch of stuff that happened that that I think that just went in different directions and made it a big PR crisis in a certain way.
Absolutely. I agree. And I don't know if Scott or Roger, if you have anything to add to that.
Sure. I think to Mina's point, social media has played a big role. We all vowed to be careful today and not talk politics, but politics has definitely played a role and is continuing to play a major role in the corporate world. You know, I can remember 10 years ago, investors, you know, they were starting to pay attention to something that was called CSR. It's an acronym. It stands for corporate social responsibility. That's even changing right now. There's a new acronym called CSJ, corporate social justice, which is you know the topic of today. But I think there's generations, the younger generation today, the people just coming out of school, it's built into their DNA, I think. So there's so much, there's a lot of that. The SEC is now mandating, in terms of the public company world, they're mandating, there's rules now, and they're looking at rules requiring companies to make disclosures on their viewpoints and what, not just their views, but what they are actually doing in this whole arena. So there's a ton of change going on. I think the polarization that exists in this country today, not just political, but even with COVID, I guess it's kind of more one-sided with COVID, but all these things are combining, and this whole topic, this whole subject is just here. It's here to stay, and companies that don't pay attention to it. And when we talk about brand, I mean, we might mean a product brand, but we might mean a corporate brand. I mean, there's companies that, you know, brand name corporations, and even the small ones that are just starting out. I think it's got to be built into their DNA because employees are demanding it, customers are demanding it, and investors are all demanding it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
I'll ladder off of Roger's comments. I think that the duration of this period of change actually goes back probably 48 months, not just 18 months. And the polarization of communities in America through our previous administration was a wake-up call. And honestly, I think the biggest change in corporate culture is the shift in power from the C-suite to the associate base, and the associate base reflecting on what their individual values are in the workplace. And so what we see today is a lot more portability in people racing out of companies that aren't purpose-built and purpose-led, and into companies that have a stronger set of values and a purpose that they align to. And so, you know, in my estimation, that's a good thing as a startup company who's seeking, you know, very high caliber talent to drive a big mission and vision. We've constructed our company around a purpose rather than try and retrofit a purpose into an existing brand, and that's a huge strategic advantage.
Perfect. And we're going to hit on that more in a little bit. And I appreciate those comments. You know, and we in those comments as well, we talked a lot about, you know, I think almost everybody mentioned social media. Like it's insane. And I think that when I say it's insane, because I feel this is a stat according to Andy Armstrong, but I feel like 90% of people get their news from Instagram and Facebook, right? Which is insane. The fact that there's so many, you see 20 words on an Instagram post and people blow up. And instead of going and digging into the thousands of pages of information or stories that actually could be built up and you can really learn. So my next question is just, what are companies actually doing out there to educate themselves on some of these topics? For me, for example, there's some of these items or issues that have been brought up where I've had to personally educate myself from my background and my upbringing. And I've spent, quite a bit of time talking to people and reading, etc. But I'm just curious, with everything going on, what is leadership? What are these companies doing to actually educate themselves? And then once they become educated, educating their employees. Roger, what were your thoughts on that?
It's a good question. We could do a full hour on that topic. Easily. I'm not sure. I don't think there's a hard and fast answer. I'm not sure what companies are doing to educate themselves. I think many of them are almost waiting till they experience a challenging situation in this area, and then they're putting their boards together, they're putting their senior teams together, and saying, "Shit, oh, pardon me, what are we going to do? We really got to do something." Let me take a minute to give you an example. It just happened 2 weeks ago. There was a woman. Could have been a man. This is not a gender thing. On a flight, who pulled her mask down after she sat down, and you probably know where this is going to go. So the flight attendant said, "It's a federal law, ma'am. I'm sorry. You have to put it not just under your nose. You got to put it all the way up." And she got it. Something must have clicked in her. Something broke in her brain or something. She got indignant. She called, there were male and female flight attendants. Out of the blue, she started saying to the women flight attendants, "I'm not going to do this." And this is a small group. And she said, and she called her a lesbian. Okay. I'll tell you where this is going. And then she went to the male flight attendant, and she used a pejorative term, gender related, to him. So in the meantime, some of the passengers were hearing all this and in shock, and they started videoing it. So within a matter of maybe minutes, not hours, but within an hour, and how they found out what company this woman worked for and what her name was, I still don't know that. So within an hour, it was on social media all over the place, and it was on where this woman worked. I'm not going to give you the name because I don't need to promote something negative here, but it was one of our clients, and it was a company that was it's a residential real estate broker based in the East Coast. None of us here are from the East, I don't think. So you would not have heard the name anyway, but it's a big firm. They have like 6,000 agents. And all of a sudden, the company started getting direct emails, or not emails. They got some emails, but all on social media. What is the company's attitude toward LGBTQ? How can you have such an employee like this? So this all started about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We got notified. Company's lawyer got notified. The whole team was whole crisis team was put together. And so we started saying, well, we can't just let all this stuff on social media keep going. So we had to craft a statement. So you try crafting a short statement, as short as you can, and when you have 10 people all trying to approve it, it takes a little while. So now it's like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. Everything's calmed down. So we said, well, we're not going to put out the statement until the morning. We're going to see what gives. So by the morning, the company was panicking. The CEO was just going nuts. By the morning, it was like amazingly forgotten. There was nothing out there whatsoever. The company decided not to put it out. So, but there was an education factor to the management team that they can't take this stuff for granted. And so there's a whole program, communications program, social media program, response program, and human resources was very much involved. Some of the gay employees we're starting to write emails internally to the CEO saying, is this true? How could we employ someone like this? So this stuff can blow up overnight. It could blow up very fast. Staying neutral or staying out of it is no longer a possibility.
Can I
Thanks.
just add something to that really quick? I think it also starts, it starts internally, right? It's like, if companies don't have the diverse advisory internally, I don't think you can respond to these things just overnight. I think it starts with internal planning and saying, we're gonna have our own commitment to make sure that internally we have this diversity, because if you don't have the diversity, how do you deal with it? You don't know how to deal with it when a crisis comes up.
Right.
But if you internally have all these pieces in place where you have the right people on your advisory board saying, hey, how do we deal with, all of a sudden the Black Lives Matter situation, and we don't have that diverse talent within our firm or within our company. How do we deal with that? We can't, because we don't know those sensitivity issues, right? So I think it also starts there. You can't just jump on the bandwagon and say, we're socially responsible. We're going to be a firm that understands you from an employee perspective and from a consumer perspective or user perspective or whatever it is that you're selling, whatever service or product. If you don't have that internally already, or if your thinking is not aligned that way.
Yeah, I think that aspect, that planning aspect is critical. And I just got an email or a message as you were talking to me from Jim, talking about crisis communications. And look, it's something, a crisis, whether that kind of a crisis or a product crisis or a plant fire or whatever, it's gonna happen to every company sooner or later.
Well, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. You know what I mean? Like it's just so that's kind of the way I look at it.
Right. And there's so many aspects. If you just take social, I made a list. There's, without even having to think of it, there's community engagement. Depending on the business you're in, there's conflict minerals, there's employee retention, there's disclosure, there's health and safety, human rights, labor relations. I mean, there's just so many things just in that one area of social, let alone environmental and governance.
Yeah, I think to add to Andy's original question, how do we educate ourselves around these topics? There's kind of two dimensions. One is, I think, as a leader, you have to have a global point of view. And so if your sole source of information is Instagram and Facebook, shame on you. Personally, I read Al Jazeera, I read the South China Times, I read the New York Times. I look across the world for data, for information, for editorial to frame a point of view, because we are a global company. And at the same time, the employee base has to have a say in policy development. And so whether it's the contemporary hot topic is vaccinations, and what are companies doing around vaccination mandates? I believe in our context, we have a responsibility to all employees, and we can't let one or two employees or a fringe have a negative impact on the total workforce. But we put that out to our company, as an employee base, to help us shape a viewpoint on that. And so if you're just driving policy from the top down, and I'm answering Kathleen's chat comment, that's kind of an old school thought process. And if you really are a purpose-led business, part of your purpose should be to listen to your people and allow your people to help frame it. Because most of my employees are significantly younger than I am, and they have a more contemporary point of view around the brand and our customer at the end of the day. So listen to your people.
And to go, we're going to get there later, but that's such a big thing to me. And it sounds maybe cliche or goofy here, but a lot of these things, these people called millennials, sometimes they're referred to as things. you know, how demanding they are and all of that. But I look at everything that's going on. And to Scott's point is I look at these millennials that, to me, the millennials that I work with, they want purpose, but they also want a business with a purpose, right? And I think that part of that is not, you know, I think they have, but it's part of that understanding them, because I do think that having that purpose, and I love that, you know, Scott has referred to this on our calls as well, but in terms of, you have to have a purpose, and you can no longer be a company that's just a bottom line company, right? Yeah. You can't just be in the business to make money anymore. That used to work, but that's that school of thought. And to the points that have been brought up, it's, you have to have a purpose. You have to be doing good. And because if anything else, your young employee base is demanding it, right? And you're only as good as your people are, is what I say. And if anyway.
Well, I think to Andy, to that point, what you have to recognize is that your people are your customer. And if you're simply focused on the bottom line and the consumer that you have today, you're not future-proofing your business. You have to listen to the associates, because they have a closer connection with the customer of the future.
Absolutely. And to Mina, your point, and I think this is critical to what you said is, and I'd encourage the companies that are here, but a lot of people don't think they're diverse, but when you actually take that step back and realize, hey, we're not as diverse as we could be or should be. And I think in terms of, you know, what are companies doing to educate themselves? I agree. It's so many people. And again, that old school of thought was, here, I'm here for the bottom line. But the companies, in my point of view, that are actually thriving are the ones that know how to take that step back, do a self-assessment, and really understand it. Go ahead, Mina.
Well, the competitive advantage is no longer with your profits. It's with people and your consumer base. So for instance, I own a tequila brand, right? And I have no business being in the alcohol industry. I didn't realize how it's a monopoly, and it's really, you know, it's controlled by the giants. And so I didn't go into the alcohol industry because I wanted, you know, obviously I love tequila, and I'm from Jalisco, where tequila comes from. But for me, I found it super interesting. And then once I hit the shelves, I realized that, you know, the Johnny Walkers of the world, the Diageos of the world, you know, Brown-Formans, is that they're in the business of selling an amazing product because they have amazing portfolios, right, with amazing products. But you don't know who they are. Like, who's selling me this stuff? And so without really knowing this industry, I went into making an amazing margarita. So my brand is a margarita in a box. And with the social, not because, you know, alcohol is a little different the way you market it. But for me, it was like, you know, how do we give back? Because we are a margarita company, but before that, we want the people that are drinking it, because obviously it's alcohol, so it doesn't apply to everyone. The people that are drinking it, it's about having a good time, but also how can we help our communities where we operate, right? So I started and self-funded this. I have a program, and it's behind my box, where it's, you know, we live to give. And so I make microloans to people struggling. It's called Paycheck to Paycheck. So people nominate, you know, they know a family that's struggling to make it to their next paycheck. It's the difference between staying in their home or going to, you know, a homeless shelter and their family breaking up. So I've made a lot of loans. They're microloans. They're not free, so they're not expected to be paid back. But we've made several loans where it gets a family to their next paycheck, and it's not, you know, not free. They don't know that it's not free, but it's a very low interest loan. Rarely gets paid back, but they go in taking a loan, not free money. And we've helped several families, and that's purely a referral from our consumers. People that see it on the back of our box, they go to our website and they nominate a family that they know is struggling. So during COVID, we had a few of those. During Christmas, you know, we try to do more of that. So then all of a sudden, you know, it's like, that's by default, that becomes a lot of the marketing component for my brand.
Awesome.
which is values
Awesome.
driven.
100% value driven, and it's an alcohol company. You can't make alcohol very different. But I didn't start with that. I started with, how can I make some change through this brand personally, because I have a passion for that. And I'm like, how can I build that into this? And it's just been like its own marketing engine.
And I think, listen, many years ago, before this topic was a hot topic, there's two companies that immediately come to mind: Ben and Jerry's and Tom's toothpaste, or Tom's. They made
Tom Shoes. Tom's Shoes.
And there was a toothpaste company.
Oh yeah, Tom's.
I
Yeah,
think it was
from
Tom's.
Vermont.
But
Yeah.
Tom's Shoes too. Tom's
Yeah.
Shoes, that's a good one. For they've got a great store on Abbot Kinney. You've probably been in it. I think for every pair of shoes you buy, what does it mean? They give away a pair of shoes.
Yeah,
to
they
someone
give
in-
away a pair to third world countries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the thing that we're seeing, and I think corporate CEOs, anyone in the C-suite has to be cognizant of this, is that number one, as I said before, neutrality is no longer an issue. You can't brush it aside. You can't do as little as possible. You got to do as much as possible. But there are both risks and rewards with this corporate social justice culture that I think we're all getting into. To Scott's point a minute ago, start talking about, masks versus no masks, or vaccine, requiring vaccinations versus not. I forgot what company it was, a big company, and many, many more all of a sudden are doing this, maybe because Pfizer got officially approved. They're requiring, it's no longer a choice. You got to be vaccinated, and it's no longer a choice. Now, is that going to piss off some people? It's going to piss off some people who, for whatever reasons, don't believe in it. Maybe they'll quit, or maybe they'll get vaccinated. But I remember, I'm old enough to remember, maybe you guys are too. Mina, you're not. But,
Oh yeah, I am.
when I distinctly remember my father, when the seatbelt laws came in your car, right? I remember my father-in-law saying, "I'm not wearing this damn seatbelt." And then I also remember people would didn't want to wear it, but they would just hold it but not plug it in. So but it's a law. You have to have seatbelts. It's a personal. But if I don't want to wear a seatbelt, why should I have to wear a seatbelt? Well, now I don't even think anyone's thinking that way, right? Everyone today,
You
it's
put
just
on your
part of
seatbelt.
Part of everyone's DNA. You wear a seatbelt, put it on automatically when you get in the car. You wouldn't think about it.
Automotive fatalities went down by like 97%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, one thing I want to hit on too is trying to look at the clock here, but and I think that, Roger, you touched on this, and I think it's really sad, and hopefully it gets really better, but I feel like a lot of these issues are reactionary, right? Like in terms of, hey, how are companies educating themselves? What policies are they putting in place?
Yeah.
Well, it's fire drill. It's fire drill. Oh, that's never going to happen to us. And then it happens to us and we don't know what. And some companies, some companies, win the lottery, get lucky. But a lot of companies out there right now don't. And so, how, and maybe one of these, you talked about it, and maybe you could expand a little bit here in terms of, how are companies making that decision? You just brought up a good one. Hey, we're with the vaccination. You know what? Our company, you will be vaccinated. Period. End of story. When we look at these social justice issues in terms of Black Lives Matter or, others, how are these decisions? I'm kind of curious is how are these decisions being made? Is it still this reactionary, or what have you seen that has actually been, proactive instead of reactionary from companies? Like, I think it'd be helpful for some of us, some on the call too, to like, what is that decision process? I know you talked about it with the email as well earlier in terms of, hey, we got the group together. We had to go through 10 approvals. We sat on it and then we let it go and didn't. But how are these decisions being made? Because they're tough decisions.
Well, Andy, I'll chime in. Coming out of a 40,000 employee company called VF Corp. We had started an education program around D&E, unconscious bias, many of the topics that a lot of companies are reacting to. We started an education program about 36 months ago, pre-COVID, that essentially started to create a platform within the company for a larger point of view versus just the bottom line. But it served a really nice purpose when topics like Black Lives Matter came up, because it was already part of the institutional culture of the company to support an effort like that. It wasn't a reaction and like, are we going to put that on our homepage of our website? 40,000 people already knew that this was a sensitive topic through training and coursework. And so it became an intuitive reaction from the marketing team to take a proactive position on it. But even with that training, it doesn't mean that you're bulletproof. And I'll just use a contemporary example where VF decided not to sell North Face jackets to a petroleum company who wanted to put their logo on the jackets as a corporate Christmas gift. And the petroleum lobby found out about this denial of order and started a campaign against VF and the North Face that was largely focused on the CEO of VF and the fact that he had just bought a $38 million piece of land to put a hangar on for his 5 corporate jets. And so you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth, right? The point being, you have to have a consistent set of values and you have to demonstrate this across all the touch points of your brand. Otherwise, people are going to call you out. You almost have to be bulletproof if you're going to stand on a soapbox around sustainability or D&E or any of the hot topics today.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
sort of what
less
happened,
reaction, more
it
like
kind of,
planning.
And it goes back to what Scott's saying is, look at what happened to Chip, right, from Lululemon, the founder and the CEO, when he said our clothing is not made for heavy set women. And that was like, whoa, wait a minute. That, I mean, so I think, the tone at the top, but also being educated from the diversity you have internally. And then also, like I said earlier, is, stay ready. So you don't have to get ready, because then it's obvious that you're trying to, get along with the times here. It's like, you have to have this already in your culture. Yes. From the bottom up, so that you don't have to scramble and kind of become, deal with the crisis. Because after that, it's a crisis and you're trying to put band-aids constantly on these things. Whereas if you're ready and you have this embedded into your purpose and your mission, and you're saying this is not acceptable ever within our culture, then it's most likely that, your consumers can see through you right away too, whether it's authentic or not.
See, I think and from a public company perspective, because you're more these companies are more in a fishbowl, obviously, because they're public. And it used to be that the CEO would meet with an investor or CFO, and there was a message that they always wanted to get out. Why are we in business? Are we in business to serve our employees? No. Are we in business to serve the customer? Hell no. We are, this is to the investor now. We are in business for one thing. We are in business to make money for our shareholders. That used to be shouted out really loud. Now, I have to tell you, it is still whispered, because professional investors, institutional investors, and they still want to hear that because that's what makes stocks go up. But they whisper it, they don't say it loud. Now what's going on, there's a term that I'm sure all of you have heard of. This is it's broader than just social justice. It's ESG, environmental, social, and governance. These are 3 areas that companies are paying attention to. It used to be only the big companies. Now it's every company. It's a small company. And some of this stuff, Andy, to your question, some of it's going to get legislated. The SEC, and I wrote this out just 2 months ago in May. There's a special SEC committee about new disclosure requirements for public companies. And it used to be, well, you got to disclose, there were always financial metrics that helped investors make their investment decisions. Well, there was five recommendations. I'll read them real quick. One is that the SEC said that investors today require material ESG information. What are companies doing for the environment? What are they doing socially? What are they doing for this is the SEC, upon which to base their investment decisions. It's not just, does the outlook look good financially? The SEC is also saying that issuers should directly, I'm reading this, so pardon me for looking down, directly provide material information to the market specifically relating to environmental, social, and governance issues, and that will help investors make their decisions. And they want to require these disclosures. They say that these disclosures will help level the playing field between issuers, between the public companies. So they want all these companies to doing it, and they are kind of saying that the companies that do more of this are going to get investors' interest. And the other two, and it says that they're going to ensure the flow of capital to U.S. markets of all sizes. And lastly, the SEC said they want the United States to take the lead on all this kind of stuff. So this is all in committee, but it's very specific, and there's going to be a lot of new laws coming out. Just like the seatbelt law, there's going to be laws legislating this stuff. So that
Can I just add something to that, Roger? I think
Sure.
nowadays companies can talk till they're blue in the face. If the consumer does not see it and it's not transparent, they're out. I mean, like, I buy products now purely based on my perception of that company. How are they Johnson & Johnson? Like, who are they? Like, who knows? But there's local brands. And I'm like, oh, this is a founder sitting somewhere in Orange County who's, has a deep understanding of the community issues, right? And so the conglomerates are now kind of, merging in these companies because they can't compete with that anymore because the consumer has changed. And so, I think there's going to be a rise in the B Corp. A lot of companies are going to strive for B Corporation. Just because you go through a rigorous test of your true value and your purpose. And so consumers are now the ones that decide who makes it and who doesn't.
No question. No question.
Well, and you guys kind of hit on one of the areas that I wanted to touch on and that we talked about is just in terms of going into sustainability. But for example, you brought up investors in the SEC demanding it. But are investors actually putting money into companies right now that focus on sustainability? Or are they just still, like you said, you can no longer come out in the public and say, all we care about is the bottom line, but secretively they're talking about the bottom line because at the end of the day, some of that, but are there investors that have made that change? What are your thoughts on that, Roger?
Yeah, I have some specific thoughts. They're not even my thoughts. I didn't know this question was coming up, but I thought it would. Capital has increasingly been being funneled. It's fact now to companies and into funds that focus on companies that are paying attention to these issues. I've got a statistic from a research report. This was from last year. It was published by an organization called the U.S. Forum for Sustainable and Responsible Investment. I'm going to read this. U.S. assets under management using sustainable investment strategies grew from 12 trillion in 2018 to more than 17 trillion last year. And Morningstar has confirmed that, and others have confirmed that. And in a weird way, COVID has contributed a little bit, and it's highlighted the importance of sustainable and resilient business models, and it's totally spurring increased capital flow to the companies that pay attention. And it can't be lip service, as Mina said. It cannot be lip service. There has to be action. But these companies are being rewarded. They're being rewarded.
Just add to Roger's comment. I wouldn't exist if there wasn't a venture appetite for businesses like ours that are purely focused on sustainability. And if anybody's got a PitchBook account, you can actually search by fund type, and impact funds are massive forces for good in the world today.
Mhm.
whether it's the new Fidelity investments arm called, what are they called? Sorry, I can't remember.
There's a bunch.
Or whether it's BlackRock.
Oh.
You know, BlackRock has completely pivoted its investment strategy around sustainable products and brands.
Yes.
So I think there's a huge force for good in the venture markets.
Huge.
There has to be.
Yeah,
It's not
I
an
agree.
option.
Well, and I was talking to an investment advisor recently that, about, hey, what differentiates you from every other investment advisor? And one of his comments is, well, one thing we can do is we'll talk to our clients about these kinds of companies and, hey, let's put part of your portfolio in these companies. And now I think the software, where you can easily track these kinds of companies. And I think I agree with what everybody's saying here. It's becoming more and more intriguing. I don't know if intriguing is the right word for investors, which then I think is going to then change the behavior of some of these companies. Because I think so much of this goes back to educating ourselves, educating our companies, right?
Yeah, completely, Andy. I think, if you watched what happened at ExxonMobil over the past 6 months and the rest of the petrochemical industry, balance of the industry has begun to shift into sustainable energy, wind, solar, et cetera. ExxonMobil said, if everybody else is going to do that, we're going to triple down on drilling, and we're going to completely focus exclusively on petrochemical as an energy source. And a small activist impact fund in San Francisco effectively lobbied shareholders and put 3 green focused board members into the ExxonMobil board as a huge proxy fight for good. And sometimes it's going to be big companies like BlackRock that shift their investment strategy. And sometimes it's going to be super passionate, small impact activist funds that do the right thing and help companies change. So it can come from a lot of different sources.
A lot of sources. We've been fortunate over the years. We've had a client that we took on, our firm took on 20 years ago, still a client, when it was doing 30 million in revenues, and just barely public. It probably shouldn't have been public. And it turned out over the past 20 years to be one of the most successful companies from a stock performance standpoint on NASDAQ. It's 50 or 60 billion now in the market cap and about 5-6 billion in revenues. And for the last, probably going back almost 10 years, there was always one person who came from one of the funds, an environmentally oriented fund, at the shareholder meeting and stood up and said, you're not doing the right things. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And for years, the company gave him the forum and paid attention to it. Fast forward to today, we just finished editing a 75-page sustainability and socially conscious report that the company paid a consulting firm, not us, good bucks to produce and do research and what should the company be doing. They paid a lot of money for it, and it's now on their website. And I can tell you who it is. It's a very socially conscious company. I'm proud to represent them, even though there's a degree of controversy in their product. It's Monster beverage. I don't know if any of you guys drink it. It's fine. We had all kinds of issues over the years. Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? The CEO is 71 and he drinks 4 of them a day, and he looks like he's 55 years old. No, he looks
Okay,
like
well, I'm gonna start drinking it.
There's the marketing campaign right
Does
there.
it has anti-aging, collagen?
This is coming. They've got this. It's hitting every single company. It's just part of it.
Yeah.
But they do have a brilliant marketing strategy when they first started. Brilliant.
Yeah, well, they're smart people.
But didn't they sell to Coca-Cola? They sold to Coca-Cola, right?
No.
Oh, they didn't?
Coca-Cola owns 18%.
Oh, only 18. Okay.
Well, but and to that point, I think that, again, as we go into the future of this, like, a company that comes to my mind is Patagonia, where you know, during all of this last 18 months, you know, my wife thinks I have an addiction with some of their products, but
Well, all of our wives do, Andy.
but you go to their website and you used to just go shop, but now you go to their website and it's about activism. And they're, you know, you've read similar to the example, Scott, that you just mentioned was they've come out and said, hey, we're no longer going to allow corporations to buy our product and put their logo on it if they're not willing to give money to the environment. If they don't have the same values and same purpose that we do, we're just not going to allow you to do it and associate your logo with us. And they're, you know, I read it as well. They're getting ready to run a campaign right now that talks about, you know, it says, don't buy this jacket or something like that. You can find it online, but just a matter of, hey, we're telling you guys that we're doing all these things for the environment, but making all of these things is essentially like against it. So before you buy our product, stop and think if you really need the thing as much as we want to sell it to you. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. The last thing, I know we only have a couple minutes left, and it was a topic I really wanted to end on, and we have touched on it, but real quick, if any of the three have a final thought on this about what companies are doing to meet the expectations of the new workforce and these employees that are really demanding change. Like we've kind of touched on this, but any thoughts on what you've seen good come out of all of this at these corporate levels?
I'll just speak, you know, personally. I had a choice to either go into a brand and fix it or start a new brand from scratch. And man, it is so much easier to start something from scratch in today's world.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because you can build in all of these topics into the organizational fabric. And I have a lot of sympathy for corporate leaders that are trying to fix an old steamship and turn this thing around. Like, it's really hard to retrofit.
It's very hard to turn it around. Yeah.
It's really tough.
But like going back to Patagonia really quick, Andy. So Patagonia is an amazing example of the founder's vision and his own lifestyle. And so is Whole Foods, John Mackey. Whole Foods became Whole Foods because John believed in clean food and sustainable practices and, clean everything to bring to the consumer in terms of no pesticides and responsible farming and all that stuff. And so I think, like Scott said, it's nowadays it's easier to start from scratch and say, I'm building this in now because it's more of a purpose than a business, and then the money will come because people will get on, will go onto your brand and go, oh, I believe in this mission too. And so I think it starts with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I guess maybe these are just parting words. I don't think, Andy, it wasn't necessarily the goal to solve the world's problems here, but maybe more to create a consciousness of it. And I think one of the things that came out today certainly is that social justice, the subject of this webinar, obviously plays a role. And I think every critical problem that companies face, that we face as individuals, from the climate to voter suppression to the gun violence, to widening income gaps, I think young people are aware of all this stuff. But none of us, we don't need to be a futurist to kind of know that we're going to be grappling with this, especially as C-suite people, and advisors to C-suite people. We're going to be grappling with this for some time. It's going to permeate the kind of brand that we're all trying to build, whether it be a product or just a corporate name that we're trying to build for our customers, for our employees, for our investors, and what we're going to foster. And I think these things have to be tackled with the same rigor that corporate managements would use to solve a business critical problem, a manufacturing issue or a product development issue. I think the social justice issues have to be tackled and straight on with that same vigor, because if we don't, as a group, if all of us don't, people on then none of the other things are going to matter anymore. I think. I really
Yeah.
believe that.
I appreciate it. And I'd love to keep going. I feel like we could talk all day, but I really appreciate everybody's thoughts and comments. And I would just end with the fact of, my takeaway is really to challenge each one of us in our own respective lives and businesses, because there needs to be, I feel like, more education around these topics, but we've got to be more proactive instead of reactive. And I think that's one of the biggest issues. And I think, we talked a lot about it. And again, Roger, Mina, and Scott, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate your insights, and I really appreciate everybody, spending an hour of your day with us. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you,
Thanks, all.
Andy. Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye.
Thank you all for attending. Please check out our website, acgsv.org, for our upcoming events. In particular, on September 16th, we have the ethical supply chain, how to incorporate sustainability, ethical labor practices, DEI, as well as visibility. I'm sure it would be of great interest to all of you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.